The headlines are lying to you. While you're distracted by the 24-hour news cycle, by the latest political scandal, or the manufactured outrage of the week, the floor is being pulled out from under the global economy. This isn't a theory. It's not a prediction. It is a mathematical certainty that has already begun its final execution. On February 14th, 25, something unprecedented happened. 4 of the largest banks in South Korea, Shinhan, KB Kookmin, Hana, and Woori, simultaneously stopped selling physical silver. They didn't just limit the supply, they didn't just raise the prices, they shut it down indefinitely. This is a black swan event hiding in plain sight. When major global banks, holding hundreds of billions in assets, can no longer source a basic monetary metal, the system isn't just stressed, it's broken. But why now? To understand the freeze of 2025, you have to look at what happened in the final weeks of 2024. Between October 1st and November 15th, 2024, 37.6 million ounces of silver vanished from the COMEX vaults. That is 47% of all registered silver gone in just 47 days. We are witnessing the largest vault drain since 1980, and the world is acting like it's business as usual. It's not just silver, it's the entire architecture of American power. While you were told we were in a trade war to protect American jobs, the architects of our financial system were performing the ultimate betrayal. Between 2018 and 2020, during the absolute peak of the tough on China rhetoric, while tariffs were flying and politicians were screaming about decoupling, Wall Street, BlackRock, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs quietly moved $1.4 trillion into Chinese markets. The trade war was theater. It was a distraction designed to keep the population focused on a puppet show, while the real wealth of the nation was being siphoned into the next rising power center. This is stage 4. And if you don't understand the pattern, you are the one who will be left holding the worthless paper. The 4-stage mechanism of collapse. History is not a series of random events. It is a cycle, a 4-stage mechanism that has destroyed every single reserve currency in recorded history. Whether it was the British pound, the German mark, or now the US dollar, the script never changes. Stage 1. The monopoly. Financial elites create a central bank to monopolize the creation of money. For the US, this was 1913. They gain the power to print money and lend it to the government at interest. The entity that creates the money becomes separate from, yet dependent on, the entity that taxes. Stage 2. The expansion. The monopoly is used to finance massive government expansion. Wars, social programs, global empires, all funded not by taxes, but by debt. Everything looks incredible. The economy booms, the empire expands, and the currency becomes the global reserve. The world thinks this time is different. Stage 3. The overextension. The system expands beyond its productive capacity. Debt hits 100% of GDP. The currency starts losing its value. Cracks appear in the foundation. To keep the system from collapsing, the central bank prints more, creating a feedback loop of debasement. We are here. Right now, U.S. national debt is at $36 trillion. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet is a ticking time bomb. Stage 4. The transfer. This is the most ruthless part. The same people who built the system, the architects of the debt, begin moving their capital to the next rising power before the collapse becomes obvious to the masses. They exit the burning building while the doors are still open, leaving the population trapped inside with a currency that is approaching zero. While Washington was putting on a show about getting tough with Beijing, the financial elites were executing Stage 4 with surgical precision. On June 1st, 2018, just 1 month before the first tariffs were imposed, MSCI, the company that dictates where institutional trillions flow, began including Chinese A-shares in its global indices. This was the invisible plumbing that forced pension funds, insurance companies, and 401ks to pump money into China. By 2020, China's weight in these indices went from 0% to 43%. The $1.4 trillion didn't move because of bad timing. It moved because the decision had already been made. The U.S. dollar, the post-Bretton Woods order, and American financial dominance are being liquidated in real time. The breaking of market physics, backwardation. If you want proof that the paper market is failing, look at the physics of the silver market today. In a functioning market, Things cost more in the future than they do today. You have to pay for storage, insurance, and the time value of money. But right now, we are in backwardation. Spot silver, silver you can hold today, is trading higher than the price of silver delivered in 6 months. In plain English, the market is screaming that a bird in the hand is worth 10 in the bush. People are willing to pay a premium just to get the metal now because they do not believe the paper promises of the future will be honored. This doesn't happen in healthy markets. It happens when the physical supply is gone and the paper claims are revealed to be a fraud. For 150 years, the price of silver has been suppressed through a massive paper scheme. For every 1 ounce of real, physical silver in a vault, there are 50 to 100 paper claims on it. The bullion banks, JP Morgan, HSBC, and others, have used these paper contracts to flood the market, creating the illusion of infinite supply. Every time the price of silver starts to rise, signaling that the dollar is dying, they dump millions of paper ounces onto the exchange to knock the price back down. They profit from the decline, cover their shorts, and keep the secret hidden. But you cannot print physical atoms. You can print $7 trillion in a year, but you cannot print an ounce of silver. And with the solar industry poised to consume up to 98% of available silver reserves by 2050, the industrial demand is finally colliding with the monetary manipulation. The canary in the coal mine. Why does silver matter so much? Why would the system go to such lengths to suppress it? Because silver and gold are the canaries in the coal mine. Gold is the money of kings. It sits in vaults. But silver is the money of the people and the lifeblood of modern technology. Your smartphone, your EV, your solar panels, your 5G infrastructure, none of it exists without silver. Unlike gold, which is recycled, silver is consumed. It is dispersed into landfills in microscopic amounts that are too expensive to recover. We have been running a supply deficit for 4 consecutive years. In 2024 alone, the world used 148.9 million more ounces than it mined. That silver has to come from somewhere. It's coming from the COMEX. It's coming from the stockpiles. And as the South Korean freeze proves, those stockpiles are empty. Rising silver prices are the ultimate warning signal. They tell the world that the dollar is losing its purchasing power. They reveal that inflation is not transitory or caused by supply chains, but is the direct result of stage 3 overextension. To protect the dollar, they must keep silver low. They must protect the theater. But the 150-year suppression scheme is breaking. The bank run on the COMEX is the sound of the machine grinding to a halt. The $1.4 trillion moved to China is the sound of the architects leaving the room. The system will change the rules to protect itself, just as it has done every time before. They will raise margins. They will suspend trading. They will force cash settlements instead of delivering metal. But as the Hunt brothers discovered in 1980, and as we are seeing again in 2025, the system can only lie for so long before reality catches up. If you think the current silver shortage is just a supply chain hiccup, you've been successfully conditioned by the theater. To truly see the trap that is closing around you, we have to travel back to 1873. History calls it the Coinage Act. But the people who lived through the fallout called it the Crime of 1873. Before that year, the United States operated on a bimetallic standard. Gold and silver were both money. If you had silver, you could mint it into coins. It was the money of the people. But the mines in Nevada were producing too much. Silver was becoming too abundant. For the bankers, the creditors, abundance is a nightmare. Why? Because when money is abundant, the money supply expands and debts become easier to repay. If you're a bank, you want money to be scarce. You want the population in debt, struggling to pay interest on a currency that is hard to find. By demonetizing silver and moving to a gold-only standard, Congress executed a massive wealth transfer from the middle class to the banking elite. It was the birth of a century of deflationary debt traps. William Jennings Bryan warned us in his A Cross of Gold speech, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." A heart? Well, he lost. The banks won, and the blueprint for modern currency manipulation was finalized. The Weimar warning: inflation is not an accident. The architects of these systems tell you that hyperinflation is a policy failure, or a bad luck. They are lying. Look at Germany in 1923. The Weimar Republic was buried in 132 billion gold marks of war debt. Their solution? The printing press. The Reichsbank began monetizing government debt at a rate that defies logic. By November 1923, $1 could buy 4.2 trillion German marks. Wages were worthless before the shift ended. The middle class, the savers, the responsible citizens, they were wiped out in a single year. But here is the part they don't teach you in school. Rudolf Havenstein, the president of the Reichsbank, didn't do this by mistake. He deliberately bought foreign currency with marks at any price, fueling the fire. Why? Because the hyperinflation destroyed the government's internal debt and liquidated the middle class, the only group capable of challenging the political and financial elite. Once the destruction was complete, Wall Street stepped in. The Dawes Plan of 1924 brought American capital to restructure Germany. They moved in after the collapse, bought the assets for pennies, and prepared for the next phase. This is the exact mechanism being used today. The inflation you are feeling now is the same tool Havenstein used. It is the systematic liquidation of your savings to pay for an unpayable national debt. 1980, the day the rules changed. Fast forward to the late 1970s. The world had just survived the Sunday evening betrayal of 1971, where Nixon severed the dollar from gold. Inflation was 13%. Two brothers from Texas, Nelson Bunker Hunt and William Herbert Hunt, saw exactly what we are seeing now. They knew the dollar was a paper illusion. They began buying silver, real, physical silver. They didn't want profit, they wanted protection. By 1980, they held 200 million ounces. The price soared from $6 to nearly $50 an ounce. Wall Street panicked. If the Hunts kept demanding physical delivery, the COMEX, the New York Commodity Exchange, would default. The world would realize the paper silver market was backed by nothing. So, on January 7th, 1980, the exchange did what it always does when the elite are losing. They changed the rules mid-game. They implemented Silver Rule 7. They banned all new buy orders. You could only sell. Then, they hiked margin requirements by several 100% overnight. The Hunts were hit with margin calls they couldn't pay. On Silver Thursday, the market collapsed. The Hunts were destroyed. But here is the secret the media buried. The people who held physical silver, not paper contracts, didn't lose. Even after the crash, silver was 66% higher than where it started. The crash only destroyed those who trusted the exchange's rules. The lesson: the system will never let you win at their table with their chips. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. The British blueprint, moving the throne. To understand why $1.4 trillion moved to China while the U.S. looks like it's in decay, you must understand the 1931 British collapse. In the 1800s, Britain was the global superpower. The pound was the reserve currency. Britain owned the world's oceans. But the cost of empire and the debt of the Napoleonic Wars began to rot the system from the inside. Did the financial elites stay and go down with the ship? No. They executed Stage 4. Years before the pound officially collapsed as the reserve currency, British capital was already pouring into American railroads and steel. The Rothschilds and the great banking houses of London built the infrastructure of the United States. By the time the British population realized their empire was over, the money was already in New York. The architects had rebuilt the exact same debt-based system in a new, younger nation. They simply moved the throne. Today, history is repeating. The $1.4 trillion moved to China by BlackRock and JP Morgan between 2018 and 2020 is the modern equivalent of the British exit. They are building the infrastructure of the next hegemon while the American population watches the trade war theater. They are exiting the burning building of the dollar and setting up shop in the yuan. The final default, 2025 and beyond. We are now approaching the endgame. The physics of the market are breaking. Supply deficit. We are mining less silver every year while industrial demand for solar, EVs, and 5G is exploding. The COMEX drain. 47% of the registered vaults were emptied in 47 days in late 2024. The global freeze. South Korea has stopped sales. China has restricted its citizens. Russia is hoarding. The bullion banks, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, are holding massive short positions. They have sold silver they do not have. As the physical supply vanishes, these banks face a mathematical wipeout. When the COMEX finally runs out of metal, they will have three choices. Raise margins to infinity, the 1980 Hunt Brothers tactic. Force cash settlements, defaulting on the silver and giving you paper dollars instead. Let the price go parabolic. They will try options 1 and 2 first. But this time, it's not two brothers from Texas. It's sovereign nations. It's China and India. You cannot change the rules on a nuclear-armed superpower that wants its physical metal. When the paper market finally disconnects from reality, the spot price you see on the news will become a lie. It might say $30, while a physical ounce costs $150 if you can even find one. We are moving towards a world where the currency is worthless paper and physical assets are the only reality. The opportunity in the chaos. The pattern doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care if you're an American patriot or a globalist. It simply executes. The $36 trillion debt cannot be repaid. The dollar's 98% loss of value since 1971 is not a dip. It's a death spiral. Stage 3 is over. Stage 4 is in its final phase of execution. You are watching the most predictable move in financial history. The elite have already moved their $1.4 trillion. The COMEX vaults are being drained by those who see what's coming. The trade war and the political stand against China are the distractors to keep you from noticing that the lifeboats have already been lowered for the architects, and they are empty for you. You have a choice. You can keep your wealth in this paper gods that Havenstein and Nixon and the Bank of England created, a system designed to debase and destroy your labor. Or you can see the pattern for what it is. When the system defaults, and it will, physical assets in your possession will be the only things that survive the transition. This is not about getting rich. It's about not being the one holding the wheelbarrow of cash in a world where it wouldn't buy a newspaper. The mechanism is accelerating. The vaults are emptying. The money has already moved. The only question left is, which side of the transfer will you be on? The pattern is clear. The theater is ending. The final reset is here. Everything documented here, the $1.4 trillion transfer, the COMEX drain, the 1873 crime, and the 4-stage mechanism, is the blueprint of your future. If you want to stay ahead of the architects, you must stop watching the show and start watching the vault. Would you like me to dive deeper into the specific legislative maneuvers being prepared for the digital dollar transition, the final cage of Stage 4?